Comptroller to join us and provide some insight into the challenges we face. I sent a letter to the Comptroller on Tuesday asking her to provide some preliminary information and join us for testimony this morning. I realized I gave her very short notice to appear, but I appreciate her accommodating this committee in its important work. Comptroller Combs, I know you have some remarks you want to give and are prepared to answer questions of the members, but before we begin, I want to offer a few comments. This committee has put in many hours over the last few weeks to address the challenges we face in meeting the needs of this state for the next biennium. The subcommittees have heard hours of testimony about the challenges of the budget as introduced, those challenges that present to the state of Texas and its citizens. We've heard several examples how declining revenues is forcing this committee, and in fact the whole House, to make difficult decisions as to what the true priorities of this state should be. But part of what we are lacking is a clear description on how we arrived at this point, what our current challenges are, and how we should address them. We hope today that the Comptroller will be able to shed some light on these issues for us. Texas and the entire country have recently faced some of the most difficult economic conditions in many years. Almost as soon as the last legislative session ended, we began to see the full effects of the recession manifest itself in month after month of double-digit declines in our sales tax. In hindsight, it's worth asking if we all should have anticipated such a decline much sooner. The result is a budget for the 2010-2011, a budget many members of this committee served in crafting, that is substantially below the constitutional threshold for being balanced. The Comptroller's revenue estimate for this January projects an ending balance of 2010-2011 of a negative $4.3 billion. As the Comptroller noted in her letter, the Texas Constitution requires the legislature to adopt a budget within available and anticipated revenues. Clearly, the budget adopted by the legislature last session and signed by the governor exceeded the Comptroller's measure for available revenue. Consequently, it falls upon this committee and the 82nd legislature to address this issue as it takes up consideration of the 12-13 budget. My hope is that the Comptroller will be able to give us insight into what led us to this point. As she notes in her response to my letter, cash balances are insufficient to support the appropriations for the remainder of the current biennium. I also hope the Comptroller can offer suggestions for addressing the 2010-2011 deficit. As I see it, this committee and the legislature have very limited options. Use of the rainy day fund, further reductions beyond the 5% and 2.5% already ordered by the legislature and the governor, or deferring certain payments into the next biennium. None of these options come without consequences, and none are what I consider ideal. As the members of this committee know, I have filed legislation to appropriate roughly $4.27 billion from the rainy day fund to the general revenue fund to address the current shortfall. Some have suggested this is premature and that additional cuts beyond what has already been ordered are the only solution. The Legislative Budget Board and the Governor have already ordered agencies to make substantial cuts to 2010-2011. A portion of these cuts have already been realized by the Comptroller in her revenue estimate and have reduced our current deficit from being even higher. Calls for even deeper cuts are something this committee are going to have to consider. But this consideration must be made in light of the testimony and the news articles that this committee members have heard. This committee and the legislature must weigh whether further reductions in the current biennium are practical and reasonable. I'm going to leave it to the members of this committee and the legislature to decide the course they wish to take. But clearly a decision must be made, and consideration of what approach we take must begin soon. Next week, we begin markup on Articles 2 and 3, the most substantial part of our budget. Not addressing this issue before markup is complete will leave this committee and the members of the legislature with a far less than complete picture of what is challenging us in the future.